Kim Williams had an unorthodox rise to the top of corporate Australia. He began his adult life as a musician, a clarinetist and composer before moving into management at Musica Viva, the Australian Film Commission, the Sydney Opera House Trust, Fox Studios and Foxtel, before taking on the job running what was then known as News Limited and is now called News Corp Australia. He spent 20 years working closely with Rupert Murdoch before his abrupt resignation. He's been writing a book ever since, which he's here tonight to tell us about. Welcome to Lateline.
Hi, Emma.
The furor from News Corp about the leaking of their financial performance this past week comes from a desire in part to keep that information secret. News is a publicly listed company. You were the CEO for almost 2 years. Why such a lack of transparency?
Well, I imagine companies release the information they consider to be of relevance to them. And News obviously believes this information is not relevant to market consideration relative to its own releases to the markets.
But of course there are many Australian shareholders. They don't separate their Australian business when they report their results. It does seem odd.
Well, I'm not responsible for any of this.
Well, what did you think of? No, well, you were there for a long period.
I am an observer of activities and take some interest in a lot of the commentary that has been made, both by News and by others, and a lot of the subterranean commentary that's moving about, a lot of which is less than generous.
Indeed. In fact, News has blamed you for the plunge in revenues in the 2012-13 year for which these results that have been leaked relate. Do you take any responsibility for the falls in revenue during your time there?
Look, I take responsibility for all the things that I did. I certainly don't take responsibility for the worldwide decline in revenues that is attached to print journalism-based businesses, for the same reasons all around the world that digital technologies have had a profound impact on consumer behaviour, on consumer preference, and on monetary value of advertising.
Is that a long way of saying no, you don't take responsibility for the falls in revenue?
No, I don't take responsibility for inheriting a whole set of Herculean forces, living with those Herculean forces and seeing those Herculean forces continue after my departure. I don't think, as much as I would like to accept responsibility for these things and to have that kind of imbued personal power, I think even someone with my kind of confident set of management settings couldn't take that responsibility.
Of Rupert Murdoch, you say, in the newspaper operation, he is very much the boss. It can at times be positively feudal. And you write that his attitude was altogether different in the broadcasting and film businesses where there was genuine meritocracy. How did those different approaches translate in practical terms?
Well, in film and television, I think that there's a general practical recognition on the part of News Corp as it then was, but 21st Century Fox as it now is, that it's a talent game. And that if you wish to compete and you wish to have a chance of being a successful winner in that business, you must compete on the terms that the whole of the industry operates on. And that means that you're acknowledging the primacy of talent, and therefore it must operate as a meritocracy and must operate according to normal, natural rules of meritocracy. Print media operates very differently, and it is in many ways an industry which is frozen in many ways in terms of different forms of hierarchy and management, where it hasn't really adapted as much to modern technologies and general modern management systems.
How would News Corp's Australian business look different if you were still at the helm?
Oh, that's a very hypothetical question.
But you must have pondered it.
Well, what should I say? It'd be spectacularly profitable. It'd be performing
brilliantly. No, that's not what I'm asking you.
Look, I certainly, seriously, I would have been a consistent and strong advocate for further deep investment in digital technologies and the development of very sophisticated digital products, whilst trying to extract every ounce of living profit available from print. I was never in any way an antagonist towards print, simply a realist about where consumers were with print.
Is Rupert Murdoch averse to that idea? To that further investment?
Look, I'm not here to talk about Rupert Murdoch or to offer some kind of Delphic realisations about...
But the book does talk about this sort of, you know, you call it feudal, positively feudal, which does
look,
come
one can only...
with that description. It does give the impression that someone is a bit outdated in their views.
Look, one can only describe the organisational framework and general approach on the part of News as being pretty feudal. I think it's a simple descriptive statement of the obvious for anyone who has worked there.
Well, you mentioned in the book that your position at News Corp was no longer tenable after your decision to launch then Labor Treasurer Chris Bowen's book, Hearts and Minds, where you also gave a speech at that launch. After a phone call about it with Rupert Murdoch, you talk about the fact that you knew that was the end for you at News Corp. Why?
Well, clearly it had been what might be characterised as being a very bad personal professional decision. It's not one I resiled from, incidentally. I thought that Chris showed considerable character in writing that book and offered what all politics needs, whether it's on the left or the right. It needs a profusion of ideas that get debated and tested and is constantly seeking to renovate itself through a commitment to public policy on the one hand and the people on the other. And I thought that it offered many ideas that were worthy of serious review.
I reacquainted myself with your speech and I couldn't see anything in it that was obviously likely to cause offence.
No, I wouldn't have thought so. I didn't think I made a partisan political speech at all. I think I made a very strong speech about the importance of the renovation of ideas and processes in political parties, and also spoke about how important it is that politicians are people who we actually respect and support in the process of trying to renew that notion of public commitment.
And we're going to talk a little bit about politics because that's another area you traverse in the book, but we'll stick with the media for a moment. And the Sydney Morning Herald reported on Saturday that the Australian newspaper hasn't made a profit in 6 years. In your view, what's the future for both newspapers?
What, for the Australian and the Sydney Morning Herald? Well, I have a pretty frosty crystal ball on all of these things, like most people. But I would think that all print journalism-based companies need to radically reinvent themselves and to find new ways of extracting a relationship with the public and actually having direct payment methods with consumers, particularly for digital products. And digital products have to be appropriately priced. And frankly, I think the public are pretty practical about most of those things.
But there are so many alternatives when it comes
to
information.
Well, there are. I mean, it wasn't I who decided to give the product away digitally for free for 20 years, which would have been one of the most stupid ideas in human history, but seems to have been one that was embraced very widely throughout the media community because they never took digital technologies seriously. It takes a long time to change a human behaviour from saying free, suddenly pay. You can't just go, you're going to pay us. It doesn't work.